Hey y'all, welcome CrossPolitic One-on-One with the Water Boy. It's good to be with you and good to be back in the new year. I'm sort of ready for 2026. I have to be ready because the sun's gonna rise and the sun's gonna set no matter what. So excited to be moving forward in 2026 and all the things that hopefully God has for you and for me and what's going on. And just pray for the new year and pray for all the endeavors that y'all have going on, and hope God blesses your hands greatly. But I'm excited to bring on David Bahnsen, our first guest of CrossPolitic One-on-One. CrossPolitic One-on-One, David, is something that I just been doing on Fridays because I honestly, I'm only interviewing people that I want to interview and have conversations that I want to have. So because we're doing some adjustments with our main show, we're actually doing some more Synodoc stuff, and then our regular show too. I wanted to kind of do my own thing and just have conversations. Like, we can't interview everybody like we used to. And so I want to have conversations with people that I just want to have conversations with. So, and of course, you're always willing to come on, and thank you so much for your friendship, David, and your kindness for always wanting to come on. So welcome to CrossPolitic One-on-One.
Well, thanks for having me. Happy New Year. It's always fun to be with you, my friend.
Yes, sir. So you are in your New York office, and the reason why that's important to state up front is that Mamdani is your mayor.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you supported him and voted for him. And
yeah, I did not, but as is often the case, I was in the minority in an election.
Yeah, right. both conservative and both Democrat, huh?
It happens quite a bit, yes.
So you texted me this week and you said, "Hey, man, anytime you guys want me to come on and talk about Trump Mamdani, I would love to come on." And so I had an interview scheduled. The guy got sick and wasn't able to come on, so I was able to actually fit you in on the fly real quick. So thank you for that.
Well,
but
I'm glad I was your sloppy seconds.
I know. But that's why you had a text from me. It was like, I can't do it. And then I was like, oh, I can. Wait.
Yeah.
Honestly, I got a ton of things I want to talk about, but when you texted me, what were you thinking about the Trump Mamdani conversation that you wanted to have?
You know, what's interesting is that there were 3 different things this week in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And I was referring at the time to the first one, and then it just blew up in the next couple hours later, and then the very next day.
Yeah.
So in no particular order of gravity of offense, but in the sequence in which these things happen. First was and I want to be clear, I'm talking about the president, not Mayor Mamdani here.
Yeah.
President Trump put out an announcement that he was going to seek the complete banning of institutions from buying residential real estate. And then a couple hours later said he was going to seek the complete banning of our defense and aerospace companies from being allowed to return capital to their investors, and that their investors would like it because it was good for America.
Oof.
And then the next day he said he was ordering Fannie and Freddie, which of course is in conservatorship of the United States Treasury Department since its 2008 failure,
right,
that he was going to order them to buy $200 billion of mortgage bonds to help bring down interest rates and support would-be home borrowers.
Yeah.
And so all of these things took place in 24 hours. And I guess there's different criticisms of each one. But yeah, I think that those are 3 different things that Mayor Mamdani would be extremely supportive of. And in fact, in the first 2 has been, and Elizabeth Warren has been a leader in driving for some of these things. So, you know, my parallel or analogy to Mamdani is somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But in this case, it's quite literal, although I'm certainly well aware that there's other things that I'm really grateful to the president for that Mayor Mamdani would not agree with. But these are 3 things that are so outlandishly out of bounds for conservatives and those of my own worldview that I thought they needed to be called out.
Yeah. So let's start with the BlackRock kind of real estate ban. Basically, everyone thinks of BlackRock when they think of this.
Yes. I got to stop you right there.
Yep.
BlackRock doesn't own any residential real estate. So either you're doing what most people do, which is fine, is you're confusing BlackRock and Blackstone. Okay, which is very common and an innocent mistake.
Yep.
Or some people believe BlackRock does actually own residential real estate because they make these ETFs, the index funds that gazillions of investors buy. And, there's some index funds that just passively own the S&P 500. And there's some companies in there that might own residential real estate.
Right.
Either way, BlackRock isn't even a 0.0000001% player in any of this. Most people are referring to Blackstone, which is a different company, but closely enough named that it confuses people. Blackstone owns about 60,000 homes through various investment products that their investors own in a country of 85 million homes.
Yeah. I'll have to, because I'd say last year, I don't know why I got on this, but last year I was just kind of researching, what kind of investment portfolios like BlackRock, if they own property, where they owned it in Idaho. I was just kind of looking in Idaho, nowhere else. And I thought I came up upon a map, and maybe it said Blackstone, but I thought it said BlackRock. But would the map, if let's say it said Blackstone, would that be because of somehow that data picked up and said, oh, BlackRock owns part of these houses because they're part of this bigger portfolio that they bought into? Is that how that data might populate that way?
It's possible. There's a couple of things it could be, but even then, BlackRock wouldn't be the owner. They're the intermediary, other people who own it, because they do passive investments. So they just make baskets that people can buy real cheap. And so it would be like saying, the BlackRock owns Apple because they own the biggest S&P 500 fund, and Apple, but BlackRock isn't the actual owner. The owner of the baskets are, and so it's a little confusing, I suppose, but not that confusing. But Blackstone, owns billions of dollars of real estate, but very little in single-family residence. They own a ton of industrial. They own a ton of data center. They own a fair amount of hotel hospitality, but they're again, they're managing on behalf of investors as well, but it's a just teeny tiny piece. And of course, in no way, shape, or form is this any of the federal government's business.
Are there parallel companies like BlackRock that are heavy into, let's say, individual homes?
No, Blackstone would be the one that they consider the biggest, and it is 0.06% of American single-family residents. Every institutional owner who owns 100 homes or more, all put together, own 1% of American single-family residents. There are some markets where of new product, new home sales, it's become a larger percent. The Federal Reserve's data says that it was as high as 6%. And that's of new sales up to 6%. So that's what we would refer to in economics as not exactly the marginal buyer. It's a very, very small number. But then you could say, well, either way, they may be coming in and bidding prices up. First of all, just if I granted any of the premises, and I don't grant a single one of them, but even if we did, I still really struggle, Gabe, with the idea that somebody wanting to buy something and someone else wanting to sell it to them, that the government is supposed to have an opinion on the price between a buyer and seller freely exchanging goods and services. So, I would love for some Christian to tell me what the limiting principle is there. So, however, but even apart from that, the main point I want to make is Bend, Oregon, San Jose, California, and Providence, Rhode Island are three of the highest performing residential real estate markets in the country the last 5 years. They have zero institutional ownership. Some of the worst performing markets are very large U.S. cities that have some of the highest institutional ownership.
What are some of those markets? The worst?
Boston, New York, Chicago.
Okay. Let's say a little bit of a devil's advocate question here, because I know this is part of the logic of, let's say, the people who are supportive of Trump is that, well, the mortgage problem has been so high, the housing market's been so bad, COVID killed supply, and so demand went up, so housing prices went up, and so, well, it just made it more for people like Blackstone to be able to buy more and get the average family out of the market. So I don't have a problem with Trump being, kind of limiting let's say these kind of or banning these kind of situations. That's basically, maybe I'm summarizing, hopefully I'm summarizing that logic accurately as they would, those who are supporting Trump in this kind of situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just that it's all the premises are wrong, and the conclusion from the premises is even more wrong. First of all, COVID was 5.5 years ago. If we didn't build houses in the year or two of the COVID lockdowns, what's our excuse for the last 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if people want to agree, because that's my argument, that our problem is a lack of new supply.
Yeah.
If they agree that that's the problem, then what is the solution to a lack of supply? Is it cutting off those that are willing to come produce new supply?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Blackstones, Apollos are large players. There's a whole bunch of smaller players, but if they're willing to come in with capital and build new supply, but then when you say they're crowding out people from buying, who is Blackstone buying for? Who are institutional buyers? They don't live in it. They all own homes. They own homes out my window here in Manhattan.
Yeah, well, they're buying for people who would rent and not be able to buy because of the floor. When the floor is artificially high.
But see, the whole point is that first of all, President Trump's ban was on single family, not multifamily.
Yeah.
Okay, which that's where the real issue is of the renters. And they have a bigger play in apartments than they would, because apartments are more institutionally owned.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that how can they bid the prices up without buyers and sellers? And why would are these smart people or dumb people? Why would they overpay for real estate?
Mm-hmm.
The market is not set by the government. The market is set by the price between buyers and sellers. But to the degree that people think that they're just so big and powerful, they're willing to overpay, the counterfactuals to that are, why did prices go up more in markets they're not in at all?
Right.
Why did they go up less in markets they are in? I think, Gabe, as we do a lot in our society, we're looking for a boogeyman here, and we're looking in the wrong place. There is someone to blame. And it is governmental. It isn't capital markets. It is primarily not even the federal government. I'm always a fan of blaming the federal government for different things. This is usually state and local, where there are zoning issues, permitting requirements, environmental regulations, SECA, and all sorts of hindrances to getting new supply built. And that is the reason we have a supply-demand imbalance that has pushed prices up and made homes unaffordable for a lot of American families. And it didn't start at COVID. Okay. The financial crisis meant that in the years that we purged ourselves of that hangover, we were not building any new supply. And millennials, instead of getting married at 25 and 28 and 30, the ages like you and I used to get married at and have kids and whatnot, they were waiting to 35 and 40. Right. And so it changed the socio-cultural dynamic of multifamily versus single family and skewed the supply-demand imbalance.
Interesting. So that was one of the points I was gonna make was, so I get the frustration, and I get that the main player in all this is the government, whether it's federal or local, from inflation. And I'll just say, even the recent inflation that was caused by both Republicans and Democrats and COVID, they both were responsible for the billions of dollars in stimulus that happened. Some under Trump, a little bit under Obama, more under Trump, some under Obama, and then you have the COVID shutdown, which in our area, the smaller you are, the bigger effect it had. The COVID shutdown, basically building stops, supplies were harder to get, and in a small town like us, that really matters. And so housing prices shoot up, inflation shoots up, mortgage interest rates go up, and so it creates just like this very frustrating storm for someone. I'm thankful I'm in a house now. I can't afford a house now in Moscow, and I've been here for 25 years. And so God was kind, got me in a good situation in 2015 before everything took off. But now, like, the next generation in our town, at least our town's like maybe it's a good example of like a microcosm, maybe some of the difficulties, is I don't know how my kids are going to afford. Somehow I got this 1915 farmhouse. It is a Sears ordered catalog farmhouse. I still got the Sears order receipt on 10 acres here in Moscow. Super cute little house, no plumbing, no bathrooms upstairs, old farmhouse. And I got a good deal on it in 2015. Supposedly now it's like worth like $1 million. So I bought it for, a quarter of that
Mhm.
basically in 2015. And now here we are 10 years later. And it's like, well, what are my kids going to be able to do? So I guess I'm just identifying is like the frustration, which is obviously lending to maybe some of the illogic. But then we're sitting here, oh, we need the government to solve it. Oh, good, Trump's going to solve it. So the government causes the problem, and then somehow our illogical response is to be like, yes, thank you, Trump.
Yeah, well, you're 100% right, and I am actually as frustrated about the whole dynamic as the people are that are hurt by it. It is not something that is affecting me personally, but it's something that drives me crazy because I have a deep care for the human flourishing I want out of our economic, administration.
Yeah.
And the problem I have, Gabe, is that we make things way worse when we allow our frustration to misdiagnose a problem.
Yeah.
Because it lets the bad actors and the real culprits off the hook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so trying to go demonize institutional capital for daring to actually make a market in something when no one else is making a market in it is not only inaccurate and untruthful, which should end the conversation there, but it also then takes our focus off of why we're not building new supply.
Right. Yeah.
And you referred to the inflationary issues post-COVID, but again, the housing thing started before.
Right.
Housing has been a multi-generational problem, and it is always and forever a byproduct. I've written about this at nauseum. Inadequate supply.
Yeah.
We have to produce more goods and services if we want to keep prices in equilibrium with demand.
I got a question that's bothered me for a long time, and I don't even know really how to ask it or how to think about it, but it seems to me, so it used to be, back in the day, and of course, maybe you could account for kind of, through this inflation, or maybe there's other ways to take this, but it seems to me back in the day, you could buy a house or build a house for $5,000. Now, of course, everything was way different regulations, all that stuff. I understand there's two different scenarios. Now you buy a house through a bank, and so it's when you got someone loaning you money, you can do monthly payments, the price is going to go up. That's just basic economics, right? Instead of being able to buy a $5,000 house and you got to pay $5,000 for it, well, why not buy a $20,000 house when you can pay $300 a month for it? And it's better, it's bigger, that kind of thing. So the economics of lending seems to help the increase of the housing prices. And of course, in the beginning, interest rates were really high, and so it kind of prohibited maybe housing prices just skyrocketing. And then in the 80s, you know the story better than I do. But I don't have a problem necessarily with lending and borrowing. But at the same time, that introduction into it and all the temptations that came with it, we've just kind of screwed things in how it's kind of rolled out over the years. If you were to maybe reset the housing situation or start back at the beginning when lending started happening, how would you structure this in a way where it doesn't lend to the problems that we have now?
Well, first of all, I would separate my answer between what I think is best practice and what I think ought to be governmental jurisdiction. There's not a lot I would say ought to be governmental jurisdiction here.
Yeah.
If a lender and a borrower, a buyer and a seller can freely come to an agreement on different things, even if I believe they're really bad ideas, I don't really have much room for the government to be involved in this one. And that maybe speaks to my own limited government bias of things that used to be a pretty popular position in the Republican Party. Right. But you're talking about more just what's prudential, what is wise. Yes. I wouldn't lend money, nor would I ever borrow. I mean, I buy my houses cash now, but there was a time in which I would take a mortgage, but always 25, 30% down payments, I think, are necessary to have protective equity, to make the whole transaction more secure.
Yeah.
And then if I could do it all over again, I'd love to see our mortgage industry not have a 30-year mortgage. I think a 10, 15, and 20-year product, it would make the monthly payment higher. It would eliminate some people being able to buy. But that longer loan seduces more people into buying a home they might not be able to really afford because the monthly payment gets a little more massaged.
Yeah.
And then they end up paying a bloody fortune more for the home because of the amortization cost of additional interest and financing. There's another thing you didn't mention. I'm going to surprise you. You know what else really pushed prices up on residential real estate in the 80s and 90s into the 2000s versus before, besides the advent of far more use of mortgage?
Yeah.
You had two incomes most often.
Yeah, that's right.
And you didn't have that before.
Right.
Banks were able to underwrite loans now at a more favorable rate, which ended up getting priced into the homes.
Right.
Because you ended up having so many more two-income families because more and more women started working outside the home.
Yes.
And it didn't actually help families to have the second income because it got priced into the real estate.
That's right.
You know who first shared that theory academically and wrote a best-selling book about it?
Was it you?
Her name was Elizabeth Warren, and she was a moderate law professor in Boston, wrote a book called The Two Income Trap.
That's right. I remember that now.
And then she did a third edition of it when she was running for senator, and she took that stuff out of it.
Really?
But it was a very good book, I hate to say.
Yeah.
At least on that front, she was dead on. Dead on.
So she analyzed the DINK or dual income scenario with the housing market.
And on automobiles as well. It was very good analysis, and she had an economist that had put a lot of data in, and there were certain other parts of the book I wouldn't be favorable to. But no, she was basically critiquing that feminism had cost more money for women than it had made.
Unbelievable.
When I grow up, I want to work for a woke company, like super woke.
When I grow up,
I want to be hired based on what I look like,
rather than my skills. I want to be judged
by my political beliefs. I want to get promoted
based on my chromosomes. When I grow up, I want to be offended
by my coworkers
and walk around the office
on eggshells
and have my words policed
by HR. Words like
grandfather,
peanut gallery,
long time no see,
no can do.
When I grow up,
I want to be obsessed with emotional safety and do workplace sensitivity training all day long. When I grow up, I want to climb the corporate ladder
just by following the crowd.
I want to be a conformist. I want to weaponize my pronouns. What are pronouns?
It's time to grow up and get back to work. Introducing the #1 woke-free job board in America, redballoon.work.
You know, we're doing research on a show that we're going to be doing and releasing hopefully next Tuesday on abortion in Idaho and kind of the larger history of abortion since Roe v. Wade. And in 1980, Roe v. Wade got passed. Well, in 1980, or 81, there was a bill presented in committee to end abortion by conservatives. And Joe Biden voted and approved the first version of it.
Yeah.
And then whatever happened to that bill, I can't remember. But then the next time it got entered into committee, Joe Biden voted against it.
Yeah. The Overton window is amazing. The Hyde Amendment, which outlawed federal funding of any abortion, was something that people like Bill Clinton weren't willing to touch.
That's right.
And now you have Donald Trump begging people to get rid of the Hyde Amendment.
Yeah, because he's, I don't know.
Horseshoe theory is real.
Horseshoe theory. Yeah, for real. And that's amazing. I think I remember that now that you talked about it when Elizabeth Warren was running for president. I think that controversy actually came up.
Yeah.
And everything. Let's move to the aerospace stuff, because actually I don't know. I saw this happen. But to me, I'm just so far from that world. And so Trump you said this last week, he basically banned companies that are part of the military industrial supply side.
What's that mean? So they're not part of the military industrial supply side. They're private businesses, and they sell to the military.
Yes.
The military doesn't have to buy from them. And if I guess the Lockheed Martins and General Dynamics and Boeings and Northrop Grumman's, these companies could say, we're not going to sell to you. And then they would lose a heck of a lot of customers. Yeah. But no, they, in our country, at least, unlike Cuba or North Korea, it's not socialized. These are private businesses.
Right. And so he banned.
And he didn't ban it. He can't. He tweeted it. Okay. He doesn't have the authority to ban it. but he said, I hereby declare that no company will be allowed to return capital to investors. And so he's trying to use the bully pulpit to force it. And obviously it's gonna, sink like a lead balloon. I've had 2 people in the administration text me that they're just praying he forgets he tweeted it. Which sometimes can happen, but the reason I bring it up is it's a very dangerous precedent, because the left will go on to say, we don't want our energy companies doing any of this stuff unless they agree for certain green things, and we don't want the banks to do this unless they agree to certain DEI, and when the president wants to say it's a quasi nationalization. If we're going to buy F-16s from you, we're going to tell you what you can do with your profits.
Yeah.
But how do they make the F-16s? Yeah. Because they have investors that give them money, and they productively put that capital to work to innovate with the greatest military equipment in the world.
Yeah.
If that capital gets treated badly, then how do they continue to have the investors to capitalize the new equipment and new investments and new innovations that are the source of our military strength, and then the source of profits to these companies? Yeah. So if the company was spending all of its profits on returning it to shareholders, then they didn't have any available capital to go fund new innovations, then they would go out of business. Right. So they have to do their own capital stewardship, as any business, including yours, including mine, have to do. Right. But we generally find a way to do that without the president of the United States telling us how to do it.
Yeah. What happened? Why did Trump, to me, it feels a little random. Why did Trump all of a sudden start picking on this?
Oh, well, again, it was an Elizabeth Warren article years ago that said these military companies get so much of their business from the government, we should set the salaries for executives. And he came in and said, no CEO of a defense company should be allowed to make more than this and more than that. What the timing of the catalyst was, I'm not sure, because what's interesting is he said it on a Wednesday, the stocks all dropped a lot. Then after market Wednesday, he said, I want $1.5 trillion of military spending next year. And then all the stocks flew higher the next day. Yeah. So it was almost like creating a stock dip to then create a big stock rally. I don't think that's why the president was doing it, but it was very odd timing, I will say.
Yeah, no. The 1.5 trillion, I mean, because the 1 trillion proposed was already an increase.
No, the 1 trillion was pretty much codified in Big Beautiful Bill in the budget reconciliation window from last year. Yeah.
Okay. So, that was an increase. So we've already given them an increase within the last year. And then
the Pentagon, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, now 1.5.
Yeah, I think Secretary Hegseth asked for 1.1 trillion, and Congress ended up approving about 1 trillion.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I understand some of the challenge here of being a conservative within, I would say, the Trump administration. Trump's a big loyalist, and it would seem hard to, I guess part of, I've kind of thought through, okay, what if I was Pete Hegseth? What if I was the Department of Commerce, executive director or whatever, and, as a Christian, you got examples in the Old Testament where Christians were helping pagan kings.
Oh, yeah.
Just be faithful with the road that you're in. Yeah. And you would see them speak up against the king if the king was asked, or if the king was doing something really blatantly idolatrous or whatever. But generally, the flow seemed to be prophets would speak up regardless. But it'd be faithful with the road that God has put you in, and do well, and advise the king in that row that you're in, and that that you're tilling. I guess, how would you kind of be handling, let's say you're in administration and you're lead Department of Commerce or whatever, how would you kind of navigate that? Like, because once you start speaking out and pointing things out against Trump, well, I imagine he's like, okay, we need to maybe remove him or reallocate him somewhere else or something. I imagine it's really difficult too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think it's a really important question. I love the way you word it, because you're asking what's the right wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I believe that there's a wise as serpent, gentle as dove commandment. But I would draw a line, though, between not saying things you're critical of which could be okay, and lying about things.
Yeah.
Saying you do like things you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Christian friends of mine in the administration that are doing that. That are saying this is great, and then they're texting me saying I can't stand it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I couldn't. And I'm not saying because I'm such this great, noble, wonderful person. But look, some of them need the jobs.
Yeah.
Some of them there's a career risk. But you are right, though, that this isn't an administration that is particularly fond of pushback, and the loyalty test is often universal.
Yeah.
That's tricky. Yeah. I have good friends in the Trump 1.0 administration that really did a great job walking that line of being able to support the president publicly where he was right. Yeah. And use, the private moments that were appropriate to share what they wanted. Yeah. But I think that that's what I don't get offended that somebody disagrees. Yeah. I get offended if they are saying one thing.
Okay, let's talk real quick about the $2 billion stuff, and then I want to end. We got about 10 minutes left here.
200 billion.
200, excuse me, not 2 billion. 200
billion. 2 billion is how much the government spent in interest since we started this phone conversation.
Wow. So what exactly is going on here? I don't understand all the financial logistics here. So maybe first describe what's going on here. So Trump orders Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, hey, buy up $200 billion in
mortgage bonds.
Mortgage bonds, correct. And so what does that mean?
Yeah.
First.
So first of all, they're not new mortgages. He's not asking them to go out and lend new $200 billion. Fannie and Freddie buy mortgages from banks that have already originated them. So it takes the mortgages off the bank's balance sheet, and then goes to Fannie and Freddie, and investors buy those bonds. And that's the way you get more leverage and more liquidity and more cyclicality to enable more and more people to borrow money. Okay. That's what it is. And then it puts downward pressure on the cost.
Okay. What he's now banks are freer to actually give out new loans again.
That's right. And because they're not holding the risk, they can move the risk to Fannie Freddie, which right now is to the taxpayer. But these are all pretty secure, well underwritten loans. They're not risky loans. Yeah. What he's saying is, I want Fannie and Freddie to use the money that they have accrued, because Fannie and Freddie lost a fortune for years and years after financial crisis. Then it's now spent over 10 years recapitalizing. And he's saying, let's spend $200 billion to go buy mortgage bonds that already exist from other banks and insurance companies. No. So what that would do is then create liquidity, because now there'd be cash that goes from the taxpayers, Fannie and Freddie, to the banks that they would then have to go make new loans. And when you have a non-price sensitive buyer, right? They're not out to negotiate the best deal. They're just buying at will because the president told them to.
Right.
It pushes the yields lower, the interest costs lower.
Okay.
So the reason to do it is because it would create more liquidity in the mortgage market at a lower cost.
Okay.
So it's it's basically what the Fed did with quantitative easing. Okay. It's using deep pockets to go manipulate interest rates for the mortgage market.
Okay. And so the result there basically is, well, I mean, I guess in how you describe it, how's that bad?
Well, first of all, it isn't their money.
Yeah.
Okay. So they ought to decide what they want to do with Fannie and Freddie. But to the extent they say, we just want to keep Fannie and Freddie nationalized forever.
Yeah.
Then there's some tricky legal and moral things there, because there are still equity holders that own 21% of the company. The taxpayers own 79%, but let's not complicate this.
Wow.
The problem is that you are using government funds to manipulate interest rates, and you're doing it on purpose. That's not like, an unfortunate byproduct. That's the only reason to do it.
Right.
So you're manipulating the market, which, in my opinion, we should have learned our lesson from, generally doesn't end well.
Yeah.
If somebody can't afford something at a market rate, like let's say a student loan, and then they can afford it once it gets subsidized, is that a good idea?
Yeah.
My testimony from history is it is not.
And so 200 billion bought up. Is this just, it seems like, I mean, because I would say our next generation coming up doesn't remember the housing crisis in 2007, 2008.
No.
How could this potentially contribute to something like that again?
It's different, and so I'm critical of it, but it isn't the same category, because with the financial crisis, you had defaults.
Yeah.
Okay, you had people buying homes they couldn't afford and couldn't pay back the loans.
Right.
And what we're talking about here are loans that are already performing. These are loans that already exist, that are already in bonds, that are already owned by investors, that he's just talking about Fannie and Freddie buying them. And as much as I'm critical of it, I'm not critical of it for that reason, that it will be promoting default risk.
That's helpful.
However, I do believe then it incentivizes new lending, that when you get artificial liquidity, now you start lending a little bit looser and looser than you did before. So it's incremental degradation in loan quality.
What spurred these actions on from Trump? Is it still like the mortgage rates aren't low enough, or you know, what spurred this on?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. He says he plans to announce a few more at Davos in a couple weeks, but things like that 50-year mortgage idea, you know, trying to ban institutions from buying homes. He's got certain people in his ear saying, you got to do something about home affordability before the midterms.
Yeah.
And I got to say, he's pulling from the statist playbook.
Yeah.
3 out of 3 ideas so far have been atrociously bad.
Yeah.
And when Kamala Harris said things like, well, I'm going to help subsidize down payments, everyone on the right rightly said, that's insane. It's just going to feed the demand side.
Yeah.
We need to promote the supply side.
Yeah.
And now, unfortunately, President Trump is doing the same thing. Lower mortgage rates do help the demand side. Right. It helps more people say, oh, I couldn't afford a home at 6%. I can afford one at 4.9. Let's go do it.
Yeah.
But then the home price just goes up. What you need is not more demand. You need more supply.
So how is Trump not like Mamdani here on these 3 issues that we've been discussing? I mean,
the first two he is. The
Okay.
first two he is. The last one is a little outside of Mamdani's portfolio. But I think that as a very direct, specific policy recommendation, if you took word for word what Trump said about President Trump said about the defense industry and institutional home ownership, and you crossed out his name and put Mayor Mamdani, these would be verbatim press releases.
Wow. Yeah. It just, I guess it's kind of boggles my mind a little bit on how if Trump puts forth a socialistic policy, you know, conservatives tend to either not say anything or overwhelmingly go with it.
Yeah.
But then, you know, somehow Mamdani, Elizabeth Warren, you know, Biden, Obama, they readily identify it and they readily don't like it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a real desire to, I think, want to be on Trump's inner circle. I think there's a number of reasons why people are doing this, whether to be liked by Trump or, you know, I think part of the problem is I think Trump knows the midterms are going to be a problem if the economy doesn't get better, if people don't feel better about their paycheck, if people don't feel better about their debt or whatever. So I think there's a number of, pressure points that Trump's feeling for 2026 that's happening. But this goes back to our conversation on tariffs. I don't understand why not just deregulate. That to me is like, well, why not deregulate the housing market? Why not deregulate the builders? Why not deregulate? You know, just freedom's amazing. It actually, freedom drops prices.
Well, and let me compliment President Trump. I think that in his first term, he understood that because he really used deregulation as a good policy tool. And whenever he talks about energy, he has a certain deregulatory bias that is very pro-market, pro-freedom.
Yeah.
Now, if I could be critical, I think sometimes, Gabe, you run into trouble with people that when they get something right, but it's sort of accidental, it isn't rooted to foundations. You know, biblically, we talk about this in the context of solid foundation versus sandy land. A lot of President Trump stuff he's right about, he's sort of instinctively right about, but he isn't really ideologically rooted.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case with him a lot economically.
Yeah.
You know, he's not a Mayor Mamdani at the end of the day. Like he would, if you asked him, do you want to socialize the means of production? He would say no.
Yeah.
But then if you said, do you think you have the wisdom to personally decide what goods and services should be imported and exported at what price and to dictate that to the American people? He would say, yes, I can handle that myself. I can do that better than markets can.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
also, to be fair, I wouldn't think he would articulate it that way either.
That's true. He wouldn't articulate it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so, I think that that's his belief system.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a technocratic, you know, version of central planning, which is it's better cosmetically than authoritarian central planning for sure. But I don't believe that that people on the right should do anything other than push back against it. Yeah. Because President Trump, if you say, well, at the end of the day, a lot of the things he's going to do that he shouldn't do, I still like him and I still like what he might do. I saw some people saying that about Blackstone or institutional housing. As they said, it probably isn't right, but I don't care. Let's just try something.
Yeah.
But the let's just try something approach to economic policy, you know, we do get presidents every now and then you're not going to like.
Yeah, right.
And I've spent 10 years now saying this. I've said it a lot on your show and in private conversations with you guys. We have a lot of overlap in our fraternity and community of friends.
Yeah.
Moral authority is not going to be there if we don't hold the line with consistency and integrity.
Yeah, that's right. David, thank you so much for coming on CrossPolitic One-on-One. Really appreciate you. Founder, president of the Bahnsen Group. Thank you very much, sir. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, brother.
All right, y'all. Thank you for joining CrossPolitic One-on-One. We have a bunch of stuff happening coming up in the new year. We got a Business Makers network. Businessmakers.network has our first national conference coming. Unfortunately, David wouldn't be able to make it there. He's already pre-booked for that. But go to businessmakers.network. We're going to be in Dallas, April 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then if you guys follow me and my wife's health and kind of faith and fitness show, waterbreak.tv. We actually got a summit happening here in Moscow, March 27th, 28th. Go to waterbreak.tv for that. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week on CrossPolitic One-on-One. Blessings.